This is Hypnotic Writing, and this specific video is a little piece of copy that I wrote for a flower shop in Tennessee. This is going to be particularly instructive in the art of innuendo. So, younger management have recently taken over this company, and in light of some of the edgier, let's say, advertising campaigns, wanted to draw attention. And naturally, as a marketer, I love drawing attention. I think that's precisely the strategy to take. So they permitted me to go a little bit further than some would with this copy. Now, innuendo is not always sexual innuendo. A little disclaimer up front. Innuendo is really any double meaning. In fact, we could say that any pun is a kind of innuendo. The goal of innuendo in hypnosis, including conversational hypnosis, is to introduce confusion. Introduce, let's say, embedded or hidden suggestions, as well as to modify the reader, in this case, listener's particular mindset in accordance with these hidden suggestions. Now, this following example is rather explicit. It's rather clear what I'm talking about, and it's rather clear that this is a kind of sexual innuendo. Right? Again, this is a flower company, and if we think about the experience of buying flowers, people don't buy the Ferrari, they buy the experience of owning a Ferrari and showing the Ferrari to their friends. In the case of a flower company, men don't buy flowers, they buy the experience of the adulation that they receive as a result of purchasing flowers for their loved one, in this case, a romantic partner. So we do have a rather banal, common interpretation of the word innuendo, but truly any kind of double meaning is capable of introducing this confusion and masking suggestions. Now, why do we want to mask suggestions? Why do we want to conceal them? Well, if our intentions are clearly read by the target, clearly interpreted and understood, then we find ourselves in a position where we're simply asking questions. This is rather explicit. It's no longer in the domain of hypnosis, so to speak. It's much more a straightforward ask or a straightforward value proposition. Oftentimes, the goal in hypnosis is to lay a series of anchors and to guide very slowly and subconsciously the client to a particular mindset, of course, at the end, where they'll accept the value proposition. We are not necessarily using anchors here, but we're instilling a psychological state that I will blatantly describe as lust, right? We're saying we are using sex to sell, so to speak. We are employing the very powerful seductive urge of men to lead them further and further into a state of, say, agitation, excitement, opportunity perception. And that opportunity perception specifically is actually at the root of all purchasing decisions. Buyers, even if confronted with the greatest deal on the books ever, right? The facts and figures line up just perfectly. They see some fantastic graphs. Oh, it's wonderful. But yet, the idea of pursuing an opportunity is really where the dopaminergic and norepinephrine kick come in. Right? So not only does there have to be a kind of novelty, which is associated with the neurotransmitter norepinephrine, but there also has to be the perception that that novelty is in fact an opportunity. So space aliens coming down from the sky and using lasers to incinerate everyone that you know and love is novel, but it's also a threat. Right? That will be tagged with our amygdalin precursor in the brain. It will be viewed forever after as a threat, and rightfully so. I mean, this is a valid interpretation of that scenario by our brains. In the case of a buying opportunity, we need to gently lead the individual to the conception that they are in full control, and should they decide to take the next step, that step forward toward the opportunity, it is there for them. Now, we can't make it too easy. This could go into the push-pull patterns. I'm hesitant to elucidate any more on this particular process. This is an early video, so I'm tempted to try to explain the entire book, right? But instead, let's get right into it. Okay, so first and foremost, this is an attention-seeking headline. Hoes dig flowers. Now, this is also an innuendo, right? Hoes dig flowers is, especially in large type font, bound to get your attention. If this were a flyer, you would turn your head and you would say, what exactly is this getting on about, right? And the perception of what is being sold, or if you are being sold to, is not necessarily present because of the distracting innuendo, as well as, let's say, the raunchy language that's presented right up front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this very brief advert once straightforwardly, and then I've actually labeled the different sections of this advert based on the intent. We could say the authorial intent and the kinds of mindsets that I expect of the reader as they read through this. Now, reading this without the labels and without an understanding, at least overtly, of what I intend to do, I want you to come to your own conclusions and see how well they line up with my authorial intent. So, hoes dig flowers. I mean it. They till that dirt till it's fertile and frisky. Not a bad thing at all if you want to be fruitful and multiply. Consider this. 92% of women surveyed said that receiving flowers from the man in their life made them feel closer. Closer to what? That's for you to imagine and us to know. After all, we're the leading flower delivery service in Tennessee. We make it easy picking, prepping, and delivering flowers right to her door. Every lady-loving bouquet comes perfectly wrapped for that critical handoff, not to mention that every stem is wrapped tight in a moistened envelope to make it a gift that keeps on giving. You just open it up, reach inside, and give her exactly what she's been wanting so badly. Why wait? Let's pollinate. Company title removed. Making couples copulate since 2001. So, a little bit about that last part there. I do want to explicitly note that was just for this particular campaign, right? These these folks were not using that tagline of making couples copulate in every campaign they use. And again, such an advertising campaign is only possible with some very trusting, permissive management. So I'm appreciative for that, because I rather like this copy. Okay, so if I'm doing it correctly, yes, so we have our highlights here on the page. Now, I've color-coded. Now, I will be doing a lot of these examples over time, and I will do my best to make the color coding consistent, but I'm afraid that it may or may not be in the next examples. So in this case, I've highlighted innuendo in purple. Now, in fact, there's a little bit more innuendo than I've highlighted, but the hoes dig flowers is very clearly a double meaning. And in the next sentence, I mean it, they till that dirt till it's fertile and frisky. Now we've conflated two things. We've conflated the subject and object. So hose is the subject, digging flowers, which is the object. I'm getting a little bit into grammar, I suppose, but then in the next sentence, I've conflated them, I've mixed them up, right? Immediately, I've grabbed the attention, and then I've introduced confusion. Now, again, the purpose of confusion is it makes the target, the reader, a little bit more suggestible, as they are confused by what they're reading, but still engaged. So, right, I could read a math book or a phone book, and somebody might be confused, but they're not going to pay attention. I'm introducing novelty. This is not something that people say every day. Hose dig flowers is a rather brusque statement, let's say. And in this next sentence with, I mean it, they till that dirt till it's fertile and frisky. Now, dirt can be fertile, but it cannot be frisky. Frisky, I think that word is understood, right? So what is digging the dirt? Is the hoe digging the dirt? It seems to be the case that the hoe might be digging the dirt, since it's also digging the flowers. But if the dirt itself is metaphorical and is capable of becoming frisky and also fertile, then it would almost imply that the flowers are digging the dirt, or tilling it, rather. So, we have a nice little wordplay with till that dirt till it's fertile and frisky. We'll talk another time with a better example about alliteration and assonance and its use in the flow and readability of language. Okay, so not a bad thing at all if you want to be fruitful and multiply. So now we're explicitly stating the notion, again in a somewhat shrouded term, a biblical quotation, if you will, that you might want your dirt to be fertile and frisky if you want to multiply. So you want to prepare your woman and take it upon yourself to till her fields. Okay, so we're speaking in metaphor, and we are mixing a few, and we're confusing the subjects here. This also, again, keeps the salesmanship implicit within the advert. I mean, this is obviously an advert. The places where it appeared, it was obviously an advert, but yet we're still not necessarily sure what is being sold. So consider this, 92% of women surveyed. So this red here indicates a credibility factor. Virtually any number that you will introduce, particularly statistics and surveys, etc., are a credibility signal. When reading a credibility signal, we have taken the focus away from this rather playful innuendo, and we've said, we actually know what we're talking about. We have some facts and figures. You know, we're a flower company deeply enmeshed in the fields of statistical research, which of course is a little ridiculous as I put it that way. But 92% of women surveyed said that receiving flowers from a man in their life made them feel closer. Okay, so now we have the full survey question. If your woman gets a flower, assuming she's not the 1 in 10, but if she's the 9 in 10 of these women that we've surveyed, she's going to feel closer. Now, again, we're going to introduce an innuendo, unfortunately not highlighted in purple. Closer to what? And that's an open question. Now, open questions are a fantastic headline. They're attention-getting. They, again, actually draw into the explicit domain this kind of innuendo and implicit question. What do flowers do? Why do men buy flowers? Well, the answer is similarly oblique. That is for us to imagine, or forgive me, that is for you to imagine, and that's for us to know. So we, not only do we have the survey data, but we are very well knowledgeable of the biblical kind of knowledge, right? We've encountered the opposite sex, and we know how to navigate in this particular field. Perhaps that's why we're in the flower business. Now, for you to imagine is a fantastic phrase. Imagine is one of these, I hesitate to say trigger word, that's a conflated phrase within hypnosis and rhetoric, but imagine immediately calls upon the reader to imagine, right? Is in some ways an embedded command. It suggests this idea of imagining. Now, if you're reading this and you find yourself, well, I'm imagining, what do they mean closer in what way, right? Of course, the illusion here is that women become physically closer to their men when receiving flowers. The original intent of the survey question, doubtlessly the interpretation of all the women that were surveyed, was emotional closeness. Now, because this is rather punchy to begin with, the physical illusion is deeply implied, and correspondingly, as the reader imagines, they are imagining the act of procreation. Now, particularly for men, you know, for all audiences, but particularly for mature men with women in their lives, romantic partners, the act of imagining this kind of copulation is a powerful emotional drive, right? I mean, if you watch a television advert for a sexy car, well, they will just stop short, because the FCC guidelines just stop short of showing you actual sex on that car. And they will do the best that they can to provoke this kind of emotional sexual response. Now, in the brain, we have gonadotrophin releasing hormone, right? We have a kind of hormone that actually changes the physiology in myriad ways. And it's very powerful, and it's also pulsatile. So when you're viewing a pornographic or pseudo-pornographic image, just really getting in deep now. So if you're viewing a pornographic or pseudo-pornographic image, you immediately get a pulse, a release of this hormone, which does things like increasing testosterone. And it also it has a broad effect on the physiology and mental state altogether, specifically regarding a dopamine release and opportunity perception. This is one of the reasons why sex is so prevalent in marketing, is because the sexual drive is deeply connected to opportunity perception. This is well researched, particularly in mouse studies. All right, moving on. This is actually taking quite a bit for this little bit of ad. So, after all, we're the leading flower delivery service in Tennessee. Obviously, here I've misspelled Tennessee, so we won't mention that this is a draft. We make it easy picking, prepping, and delivering flowers right to her door. Now, there's some grammatical issue here with we make it easy picking, prepping, and delivering flowers right to her door. But this is intentional. We want to characterize these 4 words, This is in many ways the buyer process, what the buyer can expect when they do in fact purchase your service. This is a fantastic tool, cannot be overstated, to actually cause the buyer to anticipate the response once they finally make the buying decision. Now, this is in green because, in a sense, this is, after all, we're the leading flower delivery service, right? That is authoritative. It is suggesting esteem, ethos. And this next part here is a little bit more related to the value proposition, which is we make it easy picking, prepping, and delivering flowers. So they're going to do everything. They're going to pick the flowers. Men have very little interest in picking the flowers. They have very little interest in cutting those stems and, preparing the pods and whatnot. And they also have even less interest in going to a shop, picking them up, and then delivering them, right? So this is so simple. I have, in fact, made this extremely terse statement, not simply for the case of copywriting and conserving space, but to exemplify, to match the linguistic pacing with the idea of the expediency of this service. So it looks like I need to scroll a bit. Let's see if we can do that. Oh, great. So every lady loving bouquet. Can bouquets love ladies? Again, we're conflating the experience, the purchase experience of the male who is reading this ad with the actual product itself, right? So this is a powerful technique for products specifically that allow us to begin to actually tie in the experience as if it were the product. And again, the broad mission here is to incorporate the idea that this product actually results in you having a fantastic night with your lover, right? So at the end of this, you're going to buy the product. The product is simply a means to an end, and it is so immediately correlated with these, these nighttime activities that it is one and the same. So it's perfectly wrapped for that critical handoff. So the critical handoff directly refers to, let's say you're holding the flowers behind your back and you say, here you go, here are these flowers, right? It's critical and a handoff. Now, hands are sometimes sexual instruments. A hand off is also a somewhat sexually charged word. Now, this is implicit, it's subtle enough not to be read by most of the audience, but they've also been primed to think of sexual imagery, right? So the idea that we're operating below the threshold of consciousness and still tipping towards the sexual magnetism is exactly where we want to be. So not to mention that every stem is wrapped tight in a moistened envelope. Now, this is a little more overt. The stem is wrapped in a moistened envelope. Well, that's exactly what the man is hoping for as well, right? He's hoping that those stems will remain moistened and enveloped to make it a gift that keeps on giving. So this is an illusion bringing the man, the reader, back to the original intention, or the PG intention of this innuendo-laden phrase, that the flowers are individually wrapped with water, right? So, in fact, they're the stems penetrate, and now I'm primed as well, so they penetrate this little test tube, it looks like, and it keeps them fresh for longer. This is pretty common for flower delivery. And the keeps on giving, moderately sexually charged word. Again, at the end of the sentence here, we're actually bringing them back into a kind of decency, normalcy, to disguise some of these sexual primes. You just open it up, reach inside, and give her exactly what she's been wanting so badly. So the ideal male fantasy, and potentially the female fantasy as well, and unfortunately I don't have as deep of insight, the ideal male fantasy is a highly sexually responsive woman. This is the reason that you see women, it's the reason you see women doing this thing with their lips. It's the reason you see them looking away but towards. They're available, but not overly available. This is also embodied in the concept of the Madonna whore complex. It's the idea that the woman is sexually responsive and exclusively responsive to the man that is attempting to seduce her. So this language here is very overt. Open it up, reach inside, give her exactly what she's been wanting so badly. So again, the idea of the flowers, the actual product of the flowers, the experience of the flowers, and the sexual act are being conflated to the point here where at the very end of the advert, we have climaxed, if you will, this basic proposition. Flowers result in sex, and it is for the taking, right? So you open them up, you reach inside, and you give them to her. And when you give them to her, she is ecstatic because of this incredible desire that she has that's been inculcated in her, presumably through that 92% of women surveyed, or the, I don't know, the perpetual female attraction towards flowers and pretty things. So this whole tag short code here, this is actually a button. So why wait? Let's pollinate. So very short, punchy, and again alludes back to the metaphor. So we actually want to ease up a little bit after this open up, reach inside bit. That can make even a grown man blush, right? So the pollination metaphor is a much more comfortable place for a man to actually put the cursor and follow through, to execute rather. If you imagine I said, you know, let's do it, right there, right? It's too strong. It comes across as a little bit too strong. Now, this is a common issue, let's say, with a lot of call to action buttons. They come across as too strong. To put somebody into a very high state of opportunity seeking and excitement in order to have them encouraged to actually follow through with an exclamation point ending, let's say. In this case, we ask an open question, why wait? All right, so you're riled up, you're enthusiastic, you're eager to be fruitful and multiply. So why are you waiting? You know, the very last thing in the traditional male sexual experience is waiting. So why wait? Let's pollinate. And we go back to the metaphor. It's funny, it's a little flowery, if you will, and it is indirect, highly indirect. But at this point, we have anchored this idea of flowers to sexuality heavily. And so the meaning is clear. And with our nice little tagline here of making couples copulate since 2001, hopefully we get a laugh out of that. That's not too heavy. It'd be virtually preposterous as a full-time company tagline. And it makes it clear that we're just joking around. Joking around is a critical aspect of the suspension of disbelief. We absolutely require our reader to suspend disbelief. If they imagine that they themselves are some aggressive seducer, rather. They're an aggressive seducer, and they are approaching their women, and let's say they expect sex from purchasing the flowers. Very few people will recognize that as a valid seduction strategy, right? So the idea of a man buying flowers and expecting sex is indirectly what we're implying. Not even necessarily the expectation, but the high probability of encountering sex, right? So if they were to interpret everything rather explicitly, if we weren't just kidding around, the idea of I'm going to get flowers, I'm going to have sex is far too direct. And, you know, it comes off as too forceful, at least for most people, and if not a little bit rapey, right? So we avoid all of that through the suspension of disbelief that is common through storytelling. If you notice the third paragraph here, the after all paragraph, is in many ways a story, right? It's the buyer's journey. The buyer goes to a reputable flower service in the misspelled Tennessee. The flower service makes it easy doing everything. So they do it so quickly and easily that we only use single words to describe the entire process. And then the lady-loving bouquet is presented, right? And that bouquet itself embodies that sexual act through its incredible moistened envelopes. And they simply open it up, reach inside. Couldn't be easier to do those particular things. Also is somewhat evocative. Again, we're telling a story. We've primed them for this story. And then they give her what she's wanted. So the primary factors leading to the suspension of disbelief, allowing us, hopefully, to get away with such a raunchy article, are the storytelling component, the projection of the self into the narrative that we are telling, combined with the humorous aspect, right? So this is very clearly joking around, and yet we're not joking around about having you buy our flowers. We would definitely like you to buy our flowers, and it's up to you to do that. We're not going to push you too hard, but I think you can see that there's a pretty decent reason why to purchase our flowers. All right, so that is that's the wrap up for that particular article. I think I went on a bit too much. We'll see. As we continue to progress these videos, we'll see which kinds of topics we end up covering most often. And as that happens, hopefully I'll be able to cut down the video time a bit as well. So long. I hope that helped a lot. And you can begin experimenting with Innuendo and its multifaceted benefits. Be cautious, especially if it's the sexual kind of innuendo. But again, most innuendo is not sexual. Most innuendo is probably punny. So I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I wish you the best. So long.